you guys then?
Let me check, I'm not, because I did the mic check, I'm the only one who doesn't know. Hold on, let me get this powered up.
Yeah, how's this, pretty good, or?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, very good, well, we got a few more minutes, I'm not sure. if
Yeah.
anything else is coming, but
News
Give it a
media
minute.
late? No, say it ain't so.
Pardon me?
News media would be late, say it ain't so.
Nor politicians. Everyone's out of the metro today, huh? All the candidates?
I'll bet they're covering a lot of ground, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You know, you look at people doing that, and I remember Norm Coleman when he ran for Senate, he didn't sleep for like 48 hours, he was like a zombie robot. Hey, I appreciate it. I mean, why would anyone go through that? It's amazing to get any decent people.
Yeah. Sprint to the finish.
Yes.
Last 2 miles of the marathon, right?
Yeah.
Why would anyone do it?
No one knows what happened, but that did not end well. On the record, he retired because he was 77. In actual fact, they had put him on the 7 a.m. shift because he wasn't getting along with that super producer. And then they put him on the 4 in the morning shift, I think, in my opinion, trying to shake him loose, which would be probably, I don't know what the HR file looks like, but on the surface of it would seem.
We're ready to roll if you are.
You guys all set?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Okay. I suppose we should up the billboard here too. Well, good morning and thank you for coming. Today, the Republican Party of Minnesota is announcing a media campaign to educate Minnesota voters on the issue of incompetence by Governor Mark Dayton and his administration. The campaign is titled Stop the Incompetence, Stop Mark Dayton, and it will highlight 7 issues as told by news reports and stories from major media outlets, one every day over the final 7 days until the election. Mark Dayton is very good at taking credit for fixing problems he created and ducking responsibility for his mistakes, but voters need to be aware of the litany of problems this leadership has caused. From inconsiderate treatment of citizens, to wasting taxpayer money, to hurting our business climate, to mismanagement that has created the potential for real harm, voters need to consider the consequences of these leadership problems if continued in a second Dayton term, especially given the challenges in front of us. Here are the issues that will be featured, again using information from published news reports from major media outlets, not our opinion. Huge wastes of taxpayer money, including notably the $90 million state office building, where amazingly it now appears that perhaps 23 legislators will actually have 2 offices, one in the Capitol and one in one of the other office buildings. We don't have the details on that, but it appears that it may be that way. To say nothing of the e-pull tab debacle that leaves taxpayers holding the bag for the entire $500 million of government money for the Viking Stadium. Min-share bonuses for a failed system where Mark Dayton actually hid the problems from the public and which has resulted in huge cost increases that the governor is now misrepresenting to the public. Insulting women by telling mothers to buy pot off the street. And that's to say nothing of him accusing women with home child care businesses of throwing little fits simply because they stood up to his union boss friends. His administration gave serious consideration to releasing a terrifying sex offender who had raped 60 women. His administration issued guidance, making it harder to investigate maltreatment cases, and then passed that into state law, in which the legislature appears not to really have known what was in the bill. From taxes to regulation, to killing mining, to blocking pipeline approvals, this governor, his administration, and his appointees are crushing business and jobs in Minnesota. And lastly, this governor has far too often been unaware of what's in the bills that he signs. Seat licenses, naming rights, the farm equipment tax, Governor Dayton has avoided responsibility, blamed legislators, and even staff for these issues. And stay tuned, later we'll have one more final issue of incompetence that will be announced later in the week. So with that, I am glad to answer questions.
Would you please identify yourself so we have it on the video?
Keith Downey, I'm the chairman for the Republican Party of Minnesota.
Mr. Chairman, is it going to have a media campaign to tell what it is?
It will be multi-channel.
What?
Channels, multiple channels. We're anticipating probably hitting every channel that there is.
Television channel.
Television, we're already up on television.
With this?
Yes, we have an ad that's been out for quite a few days now that's highlighting 5 of these. You can only fit so many into a 30-second TV spot, so
Radio, print?
yes. Multi-channel, all channels, social media, radio, print, TV. There are some final decisions to be made, but that's the intention.
The one that notes crushing business and jobs in Minnesota,
Right.
isn't that more of a philosophical dispute you had with the policy he took rather than him being competent about I mean, he didn't set out to do any, and he would argue that there are more jobs.
The warehouse tax, which chased businesses out of the state, the farm equipment tax.
I thought that's number 7.
There's some overlap here, Brian, of course. Some of the categories include, or some of the issues are encompassed in more than one category. And so we'll focus not just on the policy differences, but the places where Governor Dayton literally appears to not understand how businesses work, the impact of regulations, the denial of the impact of the things that he has done, blaming others for that. For example, the farm equipment repair tax, we'll go back to the media reports, but there were specific times when Governor Dayton blamed the legislators, and then he even blamed staff. Those of you who cover the legislature know how fantastic our staff is and how hard they work, frankly, to cover up the mistakes of legislators and the administration with their bill writing. So those are really, it just shows a temperament and an attitude towards these things of not wanting to take responsibility and making the mistakes and then blaming others. We just find to be unacceptable, especially when you think about another 4 years for this governor.
See a lot of ads referring to that number 1 as a luxury office building. It's conspicuously missing as a luxury office building. What's the thinking behind that?
It was probably a space issue on our media. We refer to it as a luxury office building in TV ads. I think the nomenclature of a luxury office building started way back when the first release of the drawings and the proposed plan at the time had the reflecting pool and all these other things. And I think even today, you would have to argue it is a luxury for 67 senators to have an office space like that, perhaps up to 23 of them having more than one office space, when in fact the original plans from the Capital Preservation Board, I think, had $20 million for relocation during the construction and full-blown relocation after the remodeling of the Capitol. So we think that is definitely a luxury, and I think the people of Minnesota would agree that that's a luxury.
I would agree that the original plans were pretty nice.
Luxurious.
But, I mean, that's on par with this building, what they're going to build.
We'll see. The point is, this governor passed a $90 million allocation in the tax bill in the middle of the night with Senator Bach, and if they have walked it back since then, that's just a demonstration of what we're talking about, right? Pass stuff, blame it on somebody else, pretend it didn't happen, say, oh, I don't really support that, right? The governor passes the bill and then comes back and says, oh, that's on Minnesotan. He called that state office building on Minnesota. We'll go back and verify the reference, but I'm pretty sure he did in fact say that. So I think we're very defensible in our claims, and if people want to quibble over the definition of luxury, we can let the voters decide that.
For number 5, is anyone who was on board with that, are they equally as incompetent?
I don't know if I understood the question.
Well, there was a bill that passed the legislature in order for them to sign it, so anyone who voted for that, are they equally as incompetent?
Well, the news reports I've seen, and all of this is directly from the Star Tribune reporting, this is none of our opinion. I have stated not a single thing in any of our printed or media materials that didn't come directly from the Star Tribune article. And Senator Sharon, who's the author of the bill, apparently didn't really know what this provision was doing. It was the Dayton administration that pushed it in. Representative McNamer, I'm trying to go back and remember all of the state legislators who said we had no idea.
So lawmakers who were unaware they're not competent?
You could argue all of the above. We're focusing on the Dayton administration's role in this and the fact that his administration pushed this first from a policy standpoint in 2012 and then cemented it in law in 2014. And what kind of administration would do that and would push that through the legislative process without fully educating the legislators they're asking to vote for it? Whether there's other culpability on that, we're not commenting on that. The culpability here, we think, is with the governor's
I guess what I'm getting
administration.
at is there were many Republican lawmakers, including your caucus leader in the Senate, who voted for that as well. Are you putting yourself out there for exposure to being politically incompetent or unaware by raising this in the context of my case?
If the administration, and you all know how our omnibus bills are created, right? The governor proposes an omnibus bill with numerous provisions in it. The legislature has their bills and they all get smashed together into the omnibus health and human services bill in this particular case. The provisions that the governor pushed into there and convinced legislators to vote for, we think ultimately are the responsibility of the administration. There's lots of things in those big bills where people are trusting the administration's guidance, their fiscal notes, the write-ups that they provide. So we think this is directly the responsibility of the governor, and he had a role in it.
Mr. Chair, what about that term incompetence? You also mentioned temperament. Are you questioning his competence, you know, in a legal sense, the word has to do with your mental fitness. Are you questioning his mental health?
No.
What are you questioning then with that term incompetence?
Let's just take number 2, the MNsure system, right? $165 million, year-and-a-half project, September of 2013, was that the year? Yeah, last September. The governor got a full briefing over at the governor's mansion on the 272 bugs or what, critical fixes, right, that weren't in place. Literally, weeks later, he comes out and tells the public everything's great, we got the best system in the country, it's working phenomenally well. Clearly, his administration understands what's going on. We've wasted $165 million. The thing is a debacle for the next 6 months. We finally find out in January that he actually knew what was going on when he made those representations to the public. Then we hire another consultant, great firm, to come in and try and fix it, another $5 million. We find out that there's still a boatload of fixes, that they're actually doing everything. Well, let me get to that. So they now are basically processing all of those applications on paper behind the scenes, and they went back to the legacy human services enrollment and eligibility determination system. $165 million later, 18 months later, this governor going out before the people of Minnesota and representing one thing. I'm sorry, but I don't know how to define, in my mind, that if anybody looking at from an objective standard would say there was incompetence associated with that, and on top of that, they gave the managers bonuses. I think that's incompetence from a professional standpoint.
Professionally competent, not
Correct.
personally.
Yeah, and I think that the public, hearing those same facts, would probably agree.
On the sex offender thing, I had the opportunity to accompany one of our reporters for a one-on-one at the mansion with Governor Dayton on the sex offender thing. And I can't quote him because it's been a while, but I'll paraphrase. He said, the courts are going to kick these people out. And I think Commissioner Jessen is better qualified to build a program and find a way to do this and protect the people better than the courts, who could just theoretically cut them loose. They kicked it to the legislature because there was a lot of heat over this one, and he did seem to back off on that. And of course, the legislature is a Democrat, but what are we supposed to do with these people? Constitutionally, we're not going to be able to hold them. We have to do something, or the court will. I mean, it's a tough one.
So the issue here isn't the solution strategy going forward. The issue is that, in contrast to the Pawlenty administration that did everything it possibly could legally to keep any sex offender from getting back on the streets, and then all of a sudden, surprise to a lot of these victims who were terrified by the fact that this man who had raped 60 women could possibly be put back on the street, and the governor's statements and the administration's position at the time was to facilitate that happening. And it was only the action of the Attorney General creating some kind of legal stipulation issues that precluded that from happening. And so This is not about the solutions going forward that lots of good people will work on. This is about the governor's position a year ago, and the fact that literally people who had been victimized or who had family members victimized found out by surprise that this person might be on the street pretty soon. And that uproar is what caused the governor to change his position.
Could you clarify something about the campaign? Are you hitting all 7, each of the 7 days, or one focus on one per day?
One per day, with a bonus thrown in at the end.
At the end, the last, or
Close to the last.
And how about whose face we're looking at? It's not Al Franken's face up here, it's Mark Dayton. Is this the place the party thinks they should spend their resources? Is this the more winnable race right now for you?
No, I think if you look at the history of what we have been putting out, we have been very strong, pointing the contrast between Mark Dayton and Jeff Johnson and Al Franken and Mike McFadden, so it's and.
Do you think this is a more winnable race based on recent polls?
I think that they're both very winnable. And you look at the national polls and the issues that seem to be coming to the forefront and what's driving the polls in the direction of Republicans nationally and here in Minnesota, they're definitely both winnable. I think we expected that there'd be a natural tightening of the races, there always is in Minnesota, but I think there's an extra degree of momentum in this particular race, and I think we're gonna surprise some folks on Tuesday.
A lot of the polling shows that many people still don't know Jeff Johnson.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better off if he was behind the camera? He's been kind of down from the public events for 2 days.
So ours is not to tell the candidate how to run their campaign and introduce themselves. I think you have seen since his primary win, the steady climb of his name identification and the positive reaction to that. And so, you know, it would have been nice if Jeff Johnson had the same name identification that Mark Dayton does, or had been our declared candidate, you know, back in January when everyone knew Mark Dayton was going to be the candidate. We don't have that luxury, he doesn't. And so we go right to the final end, and Jeff is touring, you know, going to start a barnstorming tour of the state to continue introducing himself.
One more.
You said earlier that he insulted women by telling mothers to buy pot off the street. I mean, he also signed the women's pay equity legislation back in May. I mean, are you saying that he's bad for women? I mean, I'm trying to get some clarification on that remark.
Well, the notion that a governor would tell mothers who are simply in advocating for their position that they can go buy marijuana on the street, and again, we'll get the exact quotes when we highlight these things. I think he said it's just a misdemeanor offense or something. And then on top of that, when this group of women that has, I thought, fought very valiantly to protect their child care businesses from being overtaken by the unions, he also made a comment that they were, I think, throwing little fits, is the exact quote. You can't treat any citizen, let alone somebody who's down here advocating for their position and may have a disagreement with you that way. So irrespective of any policy positions that the governor might take credit for, from an interaction standpoint, this is the way you're going to treat the people in Minnesota. We think that warrants highlighting as well.
Would Republicans have put forth a different medical marijuana policy?
I'm sorry.
Would Republicans have put forth a different medical marijuana policy, one that would have broadened it and allowed and not, you know, push women to buy marijuana off the streets?
I can't speak to the policy agenda. You can talk to Senator Han or Representative Dow. There were a lot of different proposals floating around, and it was one of those issues that had interesting coalitions that were created, right? It was very kind of bipartisan, and a different group of folks that were supporting different things. So I don't have an opinion on that. We think it's more just the behavior and the temperament of the governor to actually literally light into these people publicly and in a private meeting. That's really noteworthy.
Mr. Chairman.
One final one, yeah, go.
The DFL is starting a bus tour tomorrow.
Yeah.
Candidates. Does your party plan anything comparable? Or what other events you have planned in this final week?
Our candidates all have their respective barnstorming tours. Congressional candidates, Mike McFadden, Jeff Johnson, and the other state constitutional offices, and they are going to intersect at various points along the way. The thinking was that it would actually be more effective for our candidates to have their respective journeys across the state, get better coverage, and hit more places along the way, and then intersect and come together at specific points. So that's what our campaigns are doing.
Any big rallies planned?
don't think we have any big rallies right now. We have our election night event, of course, but no major rallies planned. We had the one with Senator Johnson, Ron Johnson, down in Rochester on Saturday. Nothing else that's scheduled, but as you know, these things tend to get scheduled with about 24 or 48 hours notice, so I wouldn't be surprised if we had more. Okay, thanks, everybody.
If you could have your poster for a little longer, that would be great.